What's up, everybody? Back for episode 4. Joined here with Donovan. How's it going, man?
Doing great. Good to be with you.
Good. So, much like any week or any day, there's never a shortage of headlines. And I think we initially had a plan for a certain topic. We might, punt that to a next episode. But what seems to be predominant that we'll dive in tonight is really the whole Ukraine situation and getting into narratives, getting into, in some way, there's a captivity that people find themselves in, if they realize it, maybe or not. And there's just a lot of polarization with it, but not a lot of nuance. I
As
don't know,
usual.
as usual.
It's
But
like a theme every week.
yeah. And I don't know if you have the same trend or how much you check Facebook, Donovan, but I feel like my Facebook has started to, or my algorithm has really started to just show a lot more of the left leaning dissension. And then on X, I see a lot more on the right half of demographics. I don't know if that's been what you've seen too.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff, yeah, I don't know. I think I still see a mix on Facebook. I've been getting a lot of stuff about veganism for some reason. I don't know why. But I mean, I'm not on X. So for some reason, I think I mentioned my account got suspended and I couldn't figure out how to move past that. So I just really haven't even been on there. So
Just make a new one.
yeah, okay. It's not a bad idea. It's not like I had any followers. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'll lose 3 followers and start over.
Oh. Yeah. Well, I find it interesting. It's not in my reels, so my or shorts or anything like that. That's usually like drywall installation, just because I love watching it. But
Oh.
yeah, all the political stuff stays in my actual people statuses and posts. So, but what I've seen in a lot of those is, and this can go on either side here, is it's often a lot of shares from pages like Occupy Democrats or, you know, something on the right. I can't think of one specifically, but just really patriotic. And the image is always like really pixelated and uh, a general statement that, I think can be leveraged in a sense like, well, shouldn't we all stand for this or shouldn't we all agree to this? And when it's actually just used to, I think, divide and at least not provide much of any context to a topic that it's related to, and in this case, like talking about Ukraine, like a lot of the Ukraine flags are coming out, like I stand with Ukraine. What does that mean? I think it was pretty similar with in 2020 and prior to that, like Black Lives Matter. Like, do you believe that? Like, well, do you mean it in terms of the sentence itself, or is there the ideology? Is there the organization? There's a lots of different meanings that can be conveyed in that. Like, which one do you mean? And so, yeah, I stand with Ukraine. What does that mean? I
Yeah,
think.
dude, on a side note on that, I work with a girl, young lady, I don't know if she's 30 or so, and she's definitely way far left than I am. And one of my favorite things to do, we have a great rapport, doesn't get feisty, but we engage on stuff. But I'll just ask her, hey, what is when you hear the word woke, what does that mean to you? Or, and it's just one example because one of the issues I see is that people are talking past each other. They're so polarized that woke to one person just means one thing and woke to another means a whole nother. So I'm just glad to have the opportunity to just actually ask her,
Right.
what do you mean? What does this word mean to you? And what do you think, given that, what do you think that the right's objection and using that as an insult means, And it's just fascinating to hear her perspective, and then we go from there, But I think a lot of people don't have the opportunity to actually, well, they may have the opportunity, they may not take the opportunity to actually ask somebody sincerely, what does this mean and why is it important? So you say stand with Ukraine. what does that mean and why is that important and what do you think the pushback against that is about, and having genuine conversations about it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's maybe also kind of similar to I think how liberal has been uh, really misapplied and I think miscategorized over the last few decades. And I don't know, maybe you can correct me. I think like Rush Limbaugh kind of started with that, like the liberals are have their agenda,
Yeah, there
but
were the
they,
evils, the libs. They're evil. It's basically meant the left, evil left, communist leaning portion of the country that's out to destroy America.
yeah, yeah, and I mean I think Michael Knowles even still says the libs and things like that. It's like that's historically not been the case. It's just you've broad brushed or made a category bigger than it actually is. Like
Right.
if we're talking like classical liberalism, like that would be those who would be proponents of like Socratic discussion and meeting in the town square and exchanging ideas, not necessarily sticking to a rigid set of views. Like definitely not conservative um, or even authoritarian by any means, but definitely not progressive. Like we have to keep progressing and moving forward in like it's not good enough ever. Um, like a classical liberal would be like Brett Weinstein. Like he's definitely not progressive, but he's leans more left than like AOC or someone like that. Like so, yeah, it was always just one of those things that rubbed me the wrong way, just because it's misunderstanding a term and it's misunderstanding people, and like you said, like it causes just people to talk past each other and use things as insults that really aren't accurate. So,
Yeah, it's often in conversation. I'll meet people and we talk about life and what we've done. I'll mention, I've been in ministry or, at least that I'm a believer and this and that. And they're like, oh, what denomination? And like, man, I do not want to say anything because, with you, I mean, I'm a Reformed Baptist, right? But that's not going to be helpful to almost anybody out there.
mhm.
So understanding what people mean by terms, where they're coming from. Anyway, kind of a side note, but it's related to this whole issue you're talking about polarization and, you know, people just throwing bombs at each other.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I hope like what we can get through tonight, like helps at least ourselves understand it a bit more, but even just anyone listening, like, hey, I don't know anything about this, or maybe I believe some things and I want to be challenged on it, or I just want to learn, like I hope it's helpful. So uh Ukraine.
Yes, the Ukraine.
The Ukraine. um so I mean it's really become more well known in the last few years, obviously with the hot war going on since what was it, February of 22, so basically 1 year into the Biden administration. um, there was this thing that happened, the Afghanistan withdrawal that happened, when was that, August, September of 21. I mean, completely botched. Lots of people died. We had soldiers that died over there. But one thing that was said almost immediately after it happened was, where's the next conflict that the US is going to get pulled into? Whether
Who said that?
a lot more on the populist right were saying that, or at least the anti-war. Um, yeah, I would say like I can't remember for sure, but I'm sure like someone like Jimmy Dore would
So
say,
coming from a position of like cynicism,
yeah, yeah,
okay, yeah, thanks for getting us out, but we know how you are and what you like to do. So what's next?
right, right. So and it's not like before Afghanistan there was nothing happening. I mean, we were in Afghanistan for 20 years.
Right.
Prior to that, we had stuff going on in Yugoslavia. We had Iraq Part One. We had um, Somalia. There's a lot of stuff, and then Vietnam. Um, in this vein of like forever wars, like we're forever sponsoring by proxy or directly conflict that you know ramps up the military industrial complex. So, um, which that was something President Eisenhower back in the 50s had warned about in his exit from the presidency. Like this is a thing, and in the next decade, Vietnam started ramping up. But all that to say, coming back from that, their immediate thought was, okay, what's the next thing we're going to be involved in, and we're going to dump a bunch of money, and lots of people are going to die in. So the history with Ukraine, and not going back like super far, but realistically in the last 30 some years, Ukraine originally was part of the Soviet Union, on the the western side, wherever. And this has been brought up a lot too. So in 1994, so the Soviet Union, uh, remind me, when did it fall? Was that 89 or
I think
90?
it was 90,
Yeah,
89, 90.
I was alive when that happened. I was wee babe, but
Mm-hmm.
so in 1994, there was this agreement called the Budapest Agreement, which essentially promised security assurances once Ukraine was denuclearized. So they were a nuclear power, besides Chernobyl, that was a nuclear plant, but um, they did have nuclear capabilities. And so it was this thing where the U.S. said, hey, you take out the bombs, you get rid of the stuff, we'll provide security for you. You don't have to worry about Russia. You don't have to worry about anybody else because we'll step in. And that's been a big part of, or one line that's brought up now in this conflict. Like, well, hey, the U.S. promised in '94 that we'd have their back, so we need to have their back.
Right.
Preceding that, in 1990, now declassified documents show that in February of '90, the Secretary of State James Baker promised Gorbachev, who was the Soviet Union leader at that time, him and other leaders, that the NATO expansion would not go 1 inch eastward after Germany was reunified and admitted to NATO. So because of the Soviet Union, like East Germany and West Germany were split up, there was the Berlin Wall. After the Soviet Union fell, they took down the wall, and then Germany was reunified and brought into NATO. Throughout all those talks, the U.S. said, hey, we're not going to take NATO 1 inch further eastward. Did they keep their
So more
word?
promises.
Yeah, more promises. So let me pull up. Oh, which one were we looking at here? Oh, okay.
Oh, it should have taken you directly.
Which one did you
Yeah, that's
highlight?
good. I think that one there. Either of them will do for now.
Yeah. Yeah. So NATO started back in the 40s, right after World War II. Once the Nazis were defeated, the next big enemy was communism. So 49, you see a lot of that. You also had Canada. You had the U.S., of course. 52, 55, 82, 90. All right. So in
So
90,
90's Germany, that
yep,
dark green right there that you got the
yep.
cursor on. Yep.
So you have East Germany. They join in. The 94 Budapest Agreement to protect Ukraine, which Ukraine is right here. They said, hey, you denuclearize, U.S. will take care of you. But in 90, the agreement was, hey, we won't go 1 inch eastward after. So let's look at the countries here. NATO countries added since then. In 1999, you had the Czech Republic, you had Poland, uh, and Hungary. In 2004, you had Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Romania, Slovakia, and Slovenia. Albania and Croatia joined in 2009. Montenegro in 2017. North Macedonia in 2020. Finland in 2023, and Sweden in 2024. So this map isn't completely accurate. It stops at 2020. Let's see if there's another one here.
Oh, that bottom one, bottom right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So this is more accurate. So here's Germany, not 1 inch further eastward. What happened? Eastern expansion. And so Belarus is a former Soviet Union, more of an ally with Russia than anyone else. But what do we see happen? So Sweden joins, but we see Finland joining in 23. It's a long stretch of border with Russia. Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, big stretch of border. Now, this little red part here, that's actually Russia. I don't know if you knew that. There is a
No, I saw that on the map and was curious about it. I did
Yeah,
not know that.
it's Kaliningrad. So that's how
Hmm.
they have access to that, but they're locked. They're blocked from essentially Mother Russia, except I guess up through this little portion here. But
Hmm.
yeah, so what you have here is just NATO expansion, um, and at that point, like Russia's existing, Russia's doing their thing, um, and well, that's NATO additions, and then in 2014, Ukraine. There was the coup that essentially the U.S. sponsored. You can dig up videos of John McCain. Um, and I forget the gal's name. Um, is it Stephanie Newland? But anyways, so they were proponents of it and glad it happened. It's an example of the U.S. soft power um, through U.S. like things like USAID and started the protests. Eventually, they took over, and then in that same year, Russia took Crimea, which is this little chunk here, which really gives them access to the Black Sea. Um, then, you know, was it 2019? Um, Zelensky gets elected. He's kind of handpicked for it, and through that, here we are today. So, let me bring myself back. Yeah. So what we see, there's promises kept, or there's supposed promises and promises that are um, uh, not fulfilled.
Now I was listening to some lady give a left perspective response to that and saying that all those additions to NATO were in response to basically saber rattling by Russia, which I don't know if that's true or not, if, but there's a response to it. So at the end of the day, it's like who started what? Was it NATO just encroaching upon Russia? Was it them responding to Russian aggression? But I kind of one point I would throw out about this, when the U.S. is making promises and people are saying, well, you made promises. Well, remember what we always say about promises, Dirk? You can't promise anything unless you control everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? So nobody controls everything. And at the very least, you don't know that what Russia's going to do. Maybe they were saber rattling. Maybe they were, uh, threatening, and that, uh, precipitated the expansion of NATO. I don't know. I don't know enough about history, and I probably could read two different books that said the exact opposite. Um, but I am curious how people in the West would feel if they looked at that map and they saw that red portion continue to move west, not necessarily through invasion from
Mm-hmm.
Russia, but just alliance.
Mm-hmm.
What happened if all those countries just said, "Hey, you know what? We actually align more with the Russian worldview and just view of the world and how we want to establish ourselves on the world stage," and that started turning red. Would we just be like, "Oh, that's cool"? I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's what we got ourselves into with the Red Scare, um, with McCarthyism in the 50s and 60s was
Right. Yeah. In
like
some sense, I don't have to theorize about this. This is
right.
literally happened. That's the expansion and establishment of the Soviet Union. Is that whole region turning red?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right.
So the history in the last 100+ years was like the the competition for dominance between Western civilization and communism,
Right.
more or less. There are other countries that weren't as involved, but it was like, why were we getting involved in Vietnam? Why did we get involved in Korea? Like
Right.
it's all connected with that. Um, some of it just maybe you will claim it's justifiable. Some will say no, but yeah, it's really just echoing off of a history of what we've done as a nation. Um, and so it's Victoria Nuland. That's who I was thinking of, involved with the Ukrainian coup. Um, but yeah, so bringing all that to the debate today is we find ourselves really we end the war or we escalate the war further. Um, it's not just, well, we're just going to put more money towards it. Like if you're putting more money towards it, you're escalating. You're saying we're committing to.
Or just get into a perpetual stalemate where, well, not stalemate. Eventually, something would give. You know, they're going to run out of bodies at some point.
Yeah.
But I think you could argue that, hey, we could just do this for another 5 years, just keep sending money and weapons, and it kind of stayed a stalemate, and people keep dying. But yeah, eventually, probably Ukraine runs out of bodies first.
Yeah. Oh, and what's wild with it too is that Russia supplies Europe with a lot of natural gas. So we're like, well, we're also purchasing, energy from the country we're opposing through this proxy war, which is
You got to kind of, at least I do, got to put it in a different light to really see how strange that is. Like, imagine we're at war with Hitler and we're buying coal from him, or we're really opposed to Kim Jong Un and like make him a pariah state, but we're gonna buy minerals from him.
yeah,
It's
you're
it's
funding the war
odd.
machine. Yeah,
Exactly.
and it's not even like Ford during World War II. Like you're building vehicles for the Nazis and for the Allies. Like that's third party. Like still messed
Right.
up. It's war profiteering. But this is like, hey, like you're actually the opposite. You're the opposing parties in this conflict. Like, and you're buying and supporting the other side. It's really weird. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know if a lot of people recognize that, but at least maybe in the U.S. But so at least what I've looking up and found to date. So far, the U.S. has allocated like through Congress $175 billion. Now Trump says it's more, says it's like 350 billion. Now, Grant, I think I looked up also this that there is actually some more money coming to Ukraine through USAID over the years that can be incorporated. But I think I've heard another point too is that the resources that our European military bases have put towards the conflict can also be um, or should be, given like a dollar amount. Like if we're putting all this energy towards research and surveillance and all sorts of resourcing, like that there's got to be a dollar amount on that we're putting manpower and training and things like that towards. So
But it kind of doesn't matter. I saw some left wing post earlier where they were like, it's not 175 billion, it's 128, and most of it's old equipment. It's like, okay, great. Like that doesn't change anything about the framing of this conversation. Like,
mm-hmm.
yeah, let's okay, I'll grant that to you. Now let's move on.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter.
yeah. I mean, it's still like a dollar amount that like all but maybe 100 people in the US can really fathom. Like it is such a big number. Like there's one,
Mm-hmm.
like we can't even comprehend the national debt, like
Mm.
$1 billion. Like most people won't even see $1 million in their life unless they started
Right.
saving for retirement early on. um like even $1 billion, like more than 900, like you have to write it out and see all the zeros, and like it's just not comprehensible. And just to think like we're just writing a check. A lot of it's just giving money to the manufacturers to produce the weapons and the vehicles and things like that, and that gets shipped over. But
We're not
the
going to talk about how much that stuff costs. It's almost as expensive as eggs.
yeah. um
We should send them eggs. Stupid. No, they should send us eggs.
yeah,
We'll send them weapons.
we'll
Send
barter.
us eggs. Yeah.
Yeah, good tradesies. um right, so at the beginning of the conflict, like February 22, like uh a lot of the Ukraine flag emojis come out, like especially on X, and a lot of the things that get shared around on Facebook. Like I see them with Ukraine, like, and I think then like if at first glance you're like, okay, I think this is like somewhat justifiable. Like Russia is invading, like this is not a good thing. Um, like Putin is not a good guy. But then as time went on, it became less and less talked about. well, October 7th happened with Israel and Hamas, like
Right.
that took over. Um, but it really died down in terms of the the murmuring of war up until the last couple weeks. And so really what happened with that, like you had media in and seeing this interaction between Zelensky and Vance and Trump. Now this whole meeting that was, covered by the media was like 40-50 minutes. It was a pretty, decent exchange, but what was getting shared around was like kind of the last 10 to 5 minutes of it, where um things start to turn. And did you get a chance to watch any of that?
Oh yeah, I watched it a few times. Just try to figure out what caused it to go off the rails, and sure. So I definitely have some thoughts, but yeah, continue. Yeah, setting us up.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what was the cause of the blowup? So, I I can't remember if there was a certain statement that Zelensky said, but really Vance came in and was highlighting that, well, really what a lot of people had already been seeing online and have known already, that just from a number standpoint, that globally, there's 6.9 million Ukrainian refugees who have left the country since the conflict started, have gone to other European countries, some even to the U.S. And then even within the country, there's 3.7 million displaced. Uh, Ukraine is only about 40 million people, so to think like one quarter of the people left or don't have a home, like
Mm,
that's pretty substantial.
right.
Um, And then, what's really shocking is on X, I've seen a good amount of these where there's conscripting people, like their average age in the military is like over 40. They're bringing in people off the streets. Like you see videos of, vans pull up and, some guy's walking his dog and then like military guys.
I thought you said Vance pulls up.
Oh, no, no. Um, but yeah, like the Ukrainian military pulls up and just they're yanking people off the streets to get them to the front lines, and it's
Yeah,
really sad. Um,
scary.
yeah, and
Oh,
so here he is bringing up these facts like this is not a sustainable war. It's not a sustainable conflict. You have people dying like in mass, um, and like more or less like there needs to be some sort of peace agreement. Um, at this point, like there's no winning for either side based on like the amount of death that's happened. Um, Otherwise, it's going to be this constant back and forth, get to a stalemate, and here we are 20 years later, kind of like Afghanistan. Like, all right, millions of people have died, no one won. We spent trillions of dollars on this. Like, what do we have to show for it? Like, it's nonsense. And so, um, that was kind of the thing. And then there was a lot of back and forth, and of course, Trump jumped in like, you don't know how we feel. Don't tell me how I'm gonna feel. And because, well, Zelensky was saying like, hey, this is what we're feeling. And you have a nice big ocean between you and us, but one day you will feel it. And that got Trump pretty riled up about that. But um,
absolutely.
yeah, um, yeah. So I have some
Is
other
this a
thoughts
go
that'll go
ahead?
down, but yeah, go ahead.
So I have like big picture and then zoom in. So big picture is I definitely think Trump is more friendly to Putin than any of our previous presidents. I think he likes the guy. And one of the tells in that conversation is when he starts defending Putin and joining it with Trump's experience with being accused of being a Russian asset, basically. And he starts saying Putin had to go through that. He had to endure that. And he's defending him. And I think he's been quicker to insult Zelensky than he has Putin. With Putin, he's like, well, we got to be diplomatic. What good's it going to do if I just call him a dictator? Like, that's not getting anyone to the table. But he's been quicker to um, denounce Zelensky, called him a dictator. So I think he's generally more friendly. Now, do what you will with that. Does that mean he's a Putin puppet? And no, I don't think so. But I think he's more friendly with Putin than any president of the last 5 administrations. So that's, I think, clear. And so that's the situation that Zelensky's coming into. And he's, not playing the same old game, right or wrong, whether it's safe or not. He's not playing the same old game that the last several administrations have played with global affairs. And so where you used to be able to count on what you were going to find when you got in the room, I don't think Zelensky could count on. And he was feeling that. And I think that the key things that I think the first thing that Zelensky said that kind of took it off the rails was when they were talking about wanting to do diplomacy, and then Zelensky says, "What diplomacy?" And he starts going back through history and saying, "Hey, you guys have been doing diplomacy." And he started naming presidents, and he named Obama, and then he named Trump as one of those presidents who supposedly is supposed to protect Ukraine. So he's calling Trump out and saying, "Hey, yeah, you're talking about diplomacy now, but where were you then? You have failed me," is essentially what he's saying. He's not saying it that directly, but he is saying it. And then, yes, certainly I think it super escalated okay, let me back up. I believe after that statement is when Vance chimed in
Mm-hmm.
because he saw the subtleties in what he was saying. He
Yep.
was like, okay, you're not being super forceful, but I hear what you're saying. You're basically saying we have failed you. That's disrespectful. You should be thankful. And then they start getting heated. And then when Zelensky says to Trump, you will feel it. Now Trump feels attacked because Trump's main thing is you will respect him.
Mm-hmm.
And now he feels attacked, disrespected on the public stage. Whether this, and I don't think this is wise. I don't think he handled it wisely and, you know, with a cool head. I think he felt, and maybe it'll work. I have a suspicion this tactic will work because where does Zelensky actually have to go? He
Mm-hmm.
really has to bow the knee to the U.S.
Yep.
But I think Trump got offended, frankly, and then his bravado kicked in, and now he's yelling, and now Zelensky's also some kind of alpha male, and now you got all these alpha males in the room, and they're all hot headed, and it's gotten out of control. The media's watching, and it's chaotic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder too, like if they made that whole meeting like covered by the media just to like essentially put him in his place, like we're not doing this anymore, and just to see like how he's going to react, if he's going to you know play victim, or what he's going to say to maybe rile up Trump. um
Maybe that's kind of like a 4D chess thing. I tend to think they just thought it was going to be fun. Hey, we're doing a great thing, and everyone's going to watch, and we're going to put it out there, and then all of a sudden, unpredictable crap started going on. And so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Trump is a 4D chess player, but I doubt it. At least in this situation, I think he was optimistic about, hey, we got this deal. They've agreed to sign the mineral deal. I'm going to look like the hero. Let's go on TV. And then it derailed because of egos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. um
I could be wrong, but that's kind of my take on it.
yeah, yeah, I think a deal is going to happen. um yeah, the question is like, you know, apparently the European Union's going to put a lot more money into military advancing, so it's like, what are you guys doing? um so yeah, it'll be interesting.
Which is fine. They could put more money in, and they probably, uh, some would argue that they should because of NATO agreements and all that. But like, um, the U.S. is, if the goal is for Ukraine to be able to successfully hold off or potentially defeat um, Putin and Russia, the U.S. has to be involved in that.
Mm,
I
yeah.
don't think Europe can do it alone. Europe may have
No.
the finances, but they don't have the and as soft as I think the U.S. has gotten over the last few decades, I think Europe's even more. I mean, the U.S. is still, hey, if anyone's willing to go around the world invading nations and conquering and blowing stuff up, it's the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not that soft yet. They're still willing to like enforce power globally through uh, death and violence.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see Britain and France doing that.
Yeah. Well, I think a few of them, are having elections. Well, Germany just had theirs, but um, UK is coming up. Uh, there's a big issue in Romania right now, but um, where a lot of the current parties in power are not on stable footing to retain. So it will be interesting. Like, are they going to push to get into something hot here before that happens, or
Yeah, but does the people as a whole have a like? Yes, you have to have a alignment at the top and desire to do that and push for it. But culturally, you know, America is now like within the last half a generation become less, in some demographics, less have less of a stomach for war.
mm-hmm.
But I think Europe has been there a long time before us. I mean, just think of all the global conflicts that have existed: Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, Korea. It's the U.S. leading this, and they
Mm-hmm.
may have a few thousand troops from Australia or from Britain or something. But like, I think as a whole, the populations just aren't on board with that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, obviously the leadership matters, but it's the cultural appetite for it as well. And I don't think they're there.
No, yeah, yep. Um, so kind of back to what you said, one of the criticisms that, well, it's in the media, but I'm really thinking about like social media, where like, I'll see, old friends from college and neighbors and like people from all different walks of life interacting over a topic. It's really weird to see. But one of the the lines with that is like, well, if you don't stand with Ukraine, you're just a Putin puppet, and it's one or the other. It's a binary view of it. If you're not with this, then clearly you're with this, and
Right.
it drives me nuts. Um, that there's no real nuance with it. It's black and white. We're clearly the good guys, or Ukraine is clearly the good guys. Russia is always the bad guy, and that's that. Get on board or go, Um, and oh man, it really grinds my gears.
Well, so I think this social media post I made last week, which I'll reference here a few times, but I think was indicative of that. Where I posted all global leaders are corrupt except Zelensky. Now I'm being sarcastic, but what is my point? How do you read that when I post that, Dirk?
Say it again. What was the
You
post?
get me.
Yeah,
Global leaders are corrupt except Zelensky.
yeah. So except the one who's leading the charge against big bad Russia and defenseless Zelensky and all that. Where
So who am I speaking against there? Because I'm obviously don't agree with that statement,
yeah,
but I'm kind of going. I'm kind of putting the right sarcastic font on it. Global leaders are corrupt except Zelensky. Like, right? Like,
mm-hmm.
who am I speaking against?
Yeah. I mean, right now it's the majority on the left that want to keep funding this thing. Like,
Right. So suddenly the left, or another post I made was all Trump had to do was disrespect the left, or sorry, disrespect Zelensky, and now the left loves the empire.
yeah,
Right.
mm-hmm.
So, in regards to the first post, when I said global leaders are corrupt except Zelensky, basically one of the comments I received, some of the response I received is, also we should just let Russia do this, and basically what you're saying. So you're on Russia's side. It's like, well, I didn't say that. It's not either or. Oh, I'm just calling something out that I see. Of course, I don't think Russia should invade any country. Of course, I wouldn't want to live in Russia. Of course, I think Putin is a dictator, oligarchic, power hungry. Like, yeah, that's
Yeah,
not what I'm saying at all. But it's kind of what you're saying. If you don't signal complete agreement with one side on everything, then you must mean the other that you're on the opposite side. And I'm just like, no, I'm trying to like just say what I mean in the moment about this particular issue.
mm-hmm.
And I think what was revealed, in regards to that other post where I said all Trump had to do was disrespect Zelensky, and suddenly the left loves the empire. The left is supposed to be the party of anti-war. The left is
Yep,
the one that says America is a racist, imperialistic, colonialistic, hegemonic power of oppression of the poor and brown people of the world. Okay, but forget all that for right now. Let's unite all our military and economic resources and go to war. But which is it?
yeah,
And I suspect it's because, to some degree, well, two things. Number one, Trump derangement syndrome. Number two is that a lot of the left has actually been co-opted by the military-industrial complex and oligarchy and all that kind of stuff. And they're not true leftists.
Mm-hmm.
They just put a blue, donkey on their social media page or whatever, but they're not
Yeah.
actual leftists.
Yeah, they got some indirect funding from some shady cats.
Yes.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I agree. And yeah, I mean, the whole political shift at large is just really something to behold, I think. Like the anti-war thing, that shift is pretty seismic. Like 20 years ago, it was the Republicans leading the charge on going to Afghanistan, going to Iraq, being in that forever war, the war on terror.
Right.
Um, it was, Nixon in the 70s, like the war on crime, um, doing more things at home. And yeah, I mean, who were the hippies? Like the hippies leaned left. Like
Right.
they were more of the the classic liberals like that wanted to live free, Wi-Fi, more pacifists, and
Anti-establishment.
yeah, like let's live in communes, let's love each other, and peace goes all around. Like there was a shift, and maybe that's part of the discussion where a lot of people will say like there really isn't you know true Democrats and true Republicans. It's a uniparty. We're talking like establishment versus populism, like guys like Mitch McConnell and um, Lisa Murkowski. A lot of them, like who have the R next to the name, really vote Democrat on a lot of things as well. And so they're all in cahoots, and it's really just the way the wind's blowing that they will change their views and will support something. But I recently saw, I don't know if you saw it, the Babylon Bee right after that argument with Zelensky that uh, Trump is something like Trump touts love for air, causing left to be anti-air, and it was just like somebody with a plastic bag over their head. I mean, it's exposing like the TDS, the Trump derangement syndrome, and that doesn't mean like you have to be a fan of Trump. It's just pointing out like whatever he's for, or says support for in a sentence, like automatically the left has to go the complete opposite direction, say no, that's absolutely wrong, and no matter what. Well, with the political shift, kind of going back to like I don't know if you remember, like Trump was talking about saving the whales uh, on the campaign trail, talking about like
I don't remember.
yeah, it was about like windmills and like some of the frequency that some of those can give off was actually luring whales to beach themselves and die.
Luring.
Yeah. And so he was talking about like it's killing the whales and all that, and like I mean
They're killing the whales.
right oh, not going back to that.
They're eating the dogs,
Yeah,
killing the whales.
fighting
I
the
don't know what
bears.
that is. They're melting the
Yeah.
bears.
um yeah, but all that to say, like there's a shift of like a lot of those political stances are now like, whoa, like Republicans are now like standing or all about this now, or conservatives are for this. Like weird. They used to be the opposite this way, like 20 years ago. But um so kind of going back to the the Ukraine Russia conflict. So with the Putin puppet thing, like another thing I've heard a lot too is like if we got to stop Putin because once he takes Ukraine, he's going to move on to the rest of Europe. Like basically like it's the Third Reich, World War II. Like Hitler's taking Poland, then he's moving on to the rest. I don't think that's the case. My And the reason why, so I'd say it's not the case because if he moved into any of the NATO countries to invade, it would automatically trigger Article 5. All the NATO countries get involved. It's a hot conflict. And Russia, I don't think Russia's going to really be up for that because that's going to mean essentially the U.S. is freed up to send, arsenal and artillery into Russia itself. Like, not a good thing. Big escalatory conflict. And And I don't think the U.S. really wants that, because then, I mean, with this conflict itself, it pushes Russia closer and closer to China, which is the number two superpower. I don't think that's. I think they want peace. They want this to end because they don't want to see that happen. But my my guess, my assumption is that Putin wants the sections of Ukraine that have more Russian affinity, that still speak Russian, and he wants access to the Black Sea. I think that's really it. I can be wrong, and I will totally admit that if this develops and the opposite happens, but that is what I'm kind of putting my chips on. Like, it's a it's an economic thing, but it's also a people affinity thing. Um, that's kind of what I'm going off.
Could be. I don't know. He might want to take over all of Europe. So then, what are our options right now? Um, Option is keep fighting there. I guess until, like I said, I think Ukraine will run out of bodies first. So then Ukraine falls, and then what? Or if you really want to push Russia back, then you risk, I guess you got to escalate, and then there's a, true risk of what will he will do to counter escalate nuclear weapons and all that. Or we attempt to get everyone to the table and stop this, get a ceasefire, some kind of agreement. He may not keep the agreement. Someone has asked that. Well, what if he breaks his promise? What if he breaks the agreement? Man, Trump's like, what if a bomb falls on your head, right? Like, what if? Like, who knows? But we either lay down and let him keep going, or we go in there and escalate this more to try to actually defeat him, or we try to stop this. And to me, it seems like that'd be better, the absence of war.
Mm-hmm.
And if he changes his mind and goes back on that agreement, well, then we'll revisit that then. But for the moment, I don't know what his ultimate goals are, but let's stop it for now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Yeah. And that shouldn't mean, if you want that, it means you're a puppet of Putin. Like, if you want peace, if you want to bring everybody to the table, that should not automatically mean.
Well, I think the reason people would say that is because, well, there's two reasons. Because I'm not just 100% saying we should just keep fighting with Ukraine forever, or Putin will get gain out of this. He will gain some territory probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's certain right now.
Yeah. So, well, therefore he's being rewarded. We're encouraging, this bully guy to come in and take over, a smaller country. Like, yeah, we should never do anything that encourages that. The U.S. should not do anything on the world stage that should signal that it's okay for global powers to bully weaker nations. Yeah,
Mm.
I agree.
Mm.
Hmm. We don't want to. We don't want to go down that road.
No. Um. Yeah. Kind of like a similar analogy. I had heard Dave Smith bring this up a lot, and he's more of a libertarian, and
The dude is so sharp, man.
yeah, yeah.
He's crazy.
I learned a lot, but it's similar to saying, like, rewind, back to the 2000s. Like, it's like, what does he say? It's you care about democracy, or you're an apologist for Saddam Hussein. Like, so we're up for, you're either down for invading Iraq and deposing him, or you're for him. Like, no, like, it's just nonsensical to think about it that way, and really elementary to think about it that way, because if you think, well, we're just going to topple the leader and then they're going to be a free people. Well, who's going to take the next leader position? Like, I remember Lindsey Graham, senator from South Carolina, saying, like, we need to assassinate Putin, like, posting that on X. And it's like, that's really stupid, one. But two, like, who's to say the next person in power is going to be any better?
Right.
Like,
Careful what you ask for.
I mean, and that was the thing with Iraq. Like, okay, we took out Saddam, but okay, here's ISIS. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, you either way, like, you're creating like a power vacuum that enables sometimes even worse candidates to come in and bring even more destruction and kill more people. And it's like, well, I guess we got to throw more bombs in, and like, it's just really, nonsensical. Um, so kind of going back to Russia, Ukraine, that people bring up the 94 agreement again. Like, hey, we got to be for this. We got to keep funding this because we said we would. But at the same time, we also told Russia we would not expand NATO, like that we wouldn't further the empire.
Right.
Like, so which agreement are we gonna,
Right.
refer to as like the beacon of guidance here? It's which one is it? Because we've backed or we've failed at the 1990
Made
agreement.
promises to everyone.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it's a it's not worth bringing up, at least the 94 agreement. Like, it's not worth bringing up to say as a weight and leverage, like, see, we can't get out of it. It's like, or you could also just say like that 94 agreement was a dumb agreement because it almost certainly guarantees war with NATO and Russia in the future. We just got to keep adding more countries and for Russia to get more and more suspicious and get more aggressive. Like, it's another thing that it annoys me through this. Like, NATO is always seen as this perfect, holy group of nations that can do no wrong. We're always against evil.
Yes.
But at the same time, like, it is the empire. Like, I was thinking about this earlier. There was that saying that there was that one point in time where the sun never set on the British Empire because the British were in every hemisphere. And literally, yeah, the sun would never set. New Zealand, Australia, India, Africa, the U.S., Canada, like, well, before the U.S. was the U.S. And I think about it now, like, to consider like what the U.S. empire is, like, it's even more powerful and more widespread. Like, I think what we've discovered through the USAID stuff, like, we're meddling in a lot of things in a lot of countries and wielding power that doesn't necessarily say this is a territory of the US, but we're pushing things out. And I think NATO is one of those. What we've seen, like, more countries get added under the influence and urgings of the US to kind of carry out whatever it might be. Some have even said, like, essentially NATO is kind of a proxy of the US. It's just in a different hemisphere. It's a different continent. I think there might be merit to that, but yeah.
Can we come to the door? Or go ahead. You got
Yeah,
something else to
yeah,
add
yeah.
still?
So all that to say, no one's innocent in this, and
Okay. Yes.
yeah, and I think maybe a quick perspective thing. I think Dave Smith has also said, like, you switch the countries around here and you say, like, okay, we're here in the U.S. and China has made alliances or pact agreements with countries in Central America, South America, and now in talks that have gone public that Mexico is going to join, which means China has military bases in Cuba, Jamaica, and soon to be in Mexico. How do you think the U.S. is going to respond to that?
Right.
Not great. So I kind of also have to see it from the other side too, like the progression and expansion of NATO, like, pretty obviously causes an adverse reaction from the opposing side. So let's get to the door.
Yeah, and that actually transitions right to it. So, because the fundamental issue here is that one is that we tend to view ourselves as good and others as evil. So if we identify ourselves with the West, and then we're good. Well, of course we wouldn't want Russia and China, making alliances in South America and encroaching toward Mexico because they're bad. But we can do that in Europe. We can expand NATO toward Russia because that's a good thing. We are good, they are bad, right? And that's the essential narrative I think that's at root here. So, going back to this post that I had made about, global leaders are corrupt except Zelensky, right? And then one of these guys responds, "Oh, so you're saying Putin can be trusted and it's okay for us to break our promise to Ukraine?" And it's like, no, I'm not saying all that. And I responded, no, unfortunately, we live in a climate where if Zelensky is criticized, it is assumed that one supports his enemy. It is possible to believe both are under the dominion of demons. along with U.S. rulers, right? So I'm saying is they're all demonic, right? And his response is, okay, true. However, while the world may be under a darkness, God is also at work through such leaders. I agree, God is at work through such leaders. Romans 13:4 says that basically the government exists. This is Romans 13:3 through 4. Um, let's just go to verse 4. He, referring to the government, is God's servant. If you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. He, the government, is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. Main point being here is that yes, the government serves under the sovereignty and power of God. So yes, I can't just say, oh, they're all demonic. This guy's saying, but God is at work through that. And I say, okay, yes, I have to agree with that because I believe the Bible. So my question to him is he at work through Putin? Or is it just Zelensky? Is God only at work through Trump? Is he only at work through Western powers? Or is he at work through Putin?
Right.
So who's raising up who? We frame it as though, well, Putin did something on his own or under demonic power, but now God is going to work through governors and rulers to respond to Putin.
Mm.
And I'm saying they're all under demonic power, but above that, high, way above that, even controlling the demons and moving all the keys of history is God. Moving nations, raising up Putin to invade Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Why? I don't know. But we can't just say, this is it, man. It's like it's good versus evil. Of course, when Russia encroaches, it's evil. But if we encroach, it's good. We can do that. They can't. We good, Russia bad.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I have a little more to say on that, but some other initial thoughts or response from you on that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's it's saying the thing that people can't conceive, maybe, or don't want to admit,
Mm,
that God
which
uses
is what?
dictators.
Yes. And senators.
And mayors.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dictators.
Not.
Freaking Pharaoh. Freaking Pharaoh.
Yeah.
For this reason I raised you up that I make my power known in you. He's Pharaoh.
Mm-hmm.
The guy who wanted to genocide the Jews. Was
Right.
God's instrument.
Right. Yeah, and that it doesn't mean like God loves the things that dictators do. But he's raising up the dictators for his purpose in history to further his glory,
Yes.
one way or another. And
good luck figuring out exactly what and when and how and why and
yeah. I mean, you can, even hindsight, like on this side of heaven, like it's really hard to, I think, to think about that. Like I think about like Constantine. God raised up Constantine, like became a Christian emperor.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Was it a good thing? I'd say it was a net positive. Were there bad things that came because of that? Sure.
Why was it a net positive?
There elements of Christendom, have not been good. It in maybe specific cases, like it assumes salvation of people who belong to the empire. Like the empire is Christian now. All of you must become Christian. I'm being very
No,
simplistic in
yeah,
this,
yeah, yeah.
but okay, like so we're all Christians, like without even knowing what it means to be a Christian.
Right.
And then taking specific ethics and saying, well, this is the Christian thing to do. It's like, well, that might not even be in scripture. Yeah. And so
Christianity is creeping through the shadows of Christendom.
Yeah.
It has its own agenda and its own thing, which isn't what we are proponents of is Christendom, but within that, Christianity is creeping through the fog,
Mm-hmm.
like Snoop Dogg.
Yeah. So that's what comes to my mind. Like you have to understand, above the headlines and the current events, the current conflicts, like God is doing something. He's raising up leaders. He's raising up these people for his purposes. And I think maybe why people may not want to just sit on that for long, because it's hard to process, because you can't arrive with a full answer of why.
Right.
What's the purpose in this?
Right. Yeah. So like, I don't know if Russia. I don't know what should happen, what the decision should be, and I don't have that job. I can sit out here and give opinions, and then I'm going to just go sell flooring tomorrow. But I know this: it's not as simple as the West good, Russia bad. Um, so, for example, if you go to the Bible, so we'll go reference Isaiah 10 here. Um, who's God's people in the Old Testament? The Jews, right? Now we're all Israel, Israel, and we don't have to go down that route. But as a whole, the Jews were God's people. Israel was God's people. He established their kingdom. Okay, and then Assyria invades Jerusalem, Israel, and drags people off into exile. Tons of brutality. Okay, is that good? Whose side is God on? Well, he must be on the Jews' side because they are the uh, Hebrewised, stand in for Christianized. They're the historically, even though not perfect, they're the ones that have brought the word to the world and have been aligned with God and his will. So God's on the Jews' side.
Mm-hmm.
So there it is. Jews good, Assyria bad. Okay, let's go to Isaiah 10. Just for a clear, I hope, illustration of what I've been trying to say here, which is that it's just not that simple. Isaiah 10. This is God speaking in that context of Israel being judged. Because here's the thing, you're God's people, and guess what? Judgment starts in the house of God. So take that for what it's worth. But God in Isaiah 10 is saying this: woe to Assyria. So Assyria is invading many nations, but also Israel. And he says, the rod of my anger. He calls Assyria the rod of his anger. Assyria is what? A rod. What is that? A tool. In whose hands? God. And read all of Isaiah 10 if you want to really soak this in. I'm not going to get into all of it. I'm just going to go into the beginning of this. The rod of my anger. So God is angry. At who? His people. The staff in their hands is my fury. He's not disconnected. So anytime a nation moves aggressively, God is doing that. Whether it's Putin, Xi Jinping, Hitler, the US, anybody. He doesn't just raise up some nations and some leaders. He is the king of history, and this is what he's doing. Against a godless nation, I send him. Who's that? Israel. How are they godless? I thought they were yours, God. They're God's people. You're calling them godless. Why? Because they have fallen out of line with his vision and heart for them as a nation. And against the people of my wrath, I command him. I am sending him, being Assyria, to do what? Take spoil, and seize and plunder and tread them down like the mire of the streets. But he, now, verse 7, he who Assyria does not so intend. That's not what he thinks he's doing. I'm not saying this is what Putin thinks he's doing. Putin doesn't think he's doing the bidding of God. He's doing his own bidding. And his heart does not think so. It is in his heart to destroy and cut off nations, not a few. And he goes on and on and on. And that's one of my favorite chapters, just for freaking like shifting your worldview here. The point is this: it's not as simple as West good, East bad, Christendom good, atheism bad, Jews good, Assyrians bad. And therefore, anytime there's some global conflict, we know whose side God is on and what he's doing.
Right.
You don't. You don't. So humility, prayer, pray for peace. Don't villainize one side or the other. Seek nuance. Talk to everyone. Rest in Jesus.
That's it.
That's all I got, man. That's not enough. I keep going through the rest of Isaiah 10, but that gets a little more into like Calvinism and, and all that. I mean, I've already been kind of insinuating it, but oh, all right, let's go. Here you go. Let me just go there real quick. We're here. This stuff gets me amped. And as much as you, hopefully you can tell, like, because I like politics and listen to it, I get more amped when I like read this stuff in the Word about what God is saying. So God ends up judging the king of Assyria, right? He says, okay, when the Lord, verse 12, when the Lord has finished all his work on Mount Zion and on Jerusalem, he, the Lord, will punish the speech of the arrogant heart of the king of Assyria and the boastful look on his eyes. So he's going to punish Assyria for what? For doing what he did? Maybe, but it's not what he says. It's for saying, for the king of Assyria saying, by my strength of my hand, I have done this. By saying, I did this. So God's saying, you didn't really do this. He goes on and says, shall the axe boast over him who hews with it, or shall the saw magnify itself against him who wields it? Assyria is God's axe, and so is Putin. And so is Zelensky.
Mm.
And so is Trump and Bush and Obama and whoever. Hitler. Oh! Is he an exception? No. So God's judgment to Assyria is for basically saying, I'm absent in this. God's absent in this. This is just what we're doing. It's just Putin. It's just Zelensky. It's just our decisions. It's what we're doing. God's saying, no, no, no. You aren't doing this. I'm doing this. And the way I work is confounding because you never know who I'm sending against who and for what reason and to what end, right? Because I'm God and I see the beginning and the end and I'm the Alpha and the Omega. So my big point is really to deconstruct this good versus evil, us versus them. God must be on our side to destroy the evil Putin. Like, I don't know. This is super offensive.
Mm.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. Yeah.
That's all I got.
Yeah.
We will now move into a time of response.
Oh, yeah. I have nothing to follow up with that. I think it's a lot to sit on, and I don't think it's one where you hear it and can just be settled with it. I think that's something you have to really chew on for a while, and you have to apply it in all of life. Like, it's not just like this conflict, like you said. It's, you look back at history, you look back, well, you apply it to events that have yet to take place, and
it's your daily life.
Yeah.
Right? God sends a frustrating coworker. Well, God put them there. Someone said years ago, when someone sends a difficult person into your life, he's confronting you with yourself.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Most of what I do is quote people who are wiser than me. Yeah. So anyway, that's for another show or something. But the idea is that it isn't just about global conflicts. It's about God's sovereignty over everything. And the strange ways he works.
Strange indeed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, I think it's a good place to stop here. So, it's been good chatting with you. Hope everyone enjoyed this. But yeah, we'll be on coming up here next episode. Till next time, see ya.
Good night.